Hello and thank you for joining in on today's training. Heart and Solutions is a proud provider of CE-eligible trainings for our counseling community. This training may be eligible for continuing education credit hours through either the National Board for Certified Counselors, provider number 7376, or the Association of Play Therapy, provider number 21-645. To obtain CE hours for today's training, be sure to follow the steps in the description below to find and take your quiz.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Dr. Colleen Grote. I am joined by Molly Barrett today. And as you all heard, I did just start a recording of this training. And so I just want to give everybody permission to feel free to turn off your cameras if you do not wish to be seen and share any of your information. If you want to change your name or any identifying information for this recording, please feel free to do so. Additionally, you're welcome to come off of mute throughout the training and ask questions. However, if you want to remain confidential in those questions or statements, please feel free to use the chat function along the side there. Welcome, good morning. We are really excited to be able to present this training. This is a new training that we've been working on. Molly and I have put a lot of our hearts and souls and time and effort into this training. It's a topic that is very special to us, and we are really excited to be able to share the information that we've learned, as well as maybe learn some information from all of you today as well. So we will be talking about a trauma-informed approach to fitness today. Molly, I'll let you do some introductions first.
For sure. My name is Molly Barrett. I'm the clinical director for the Cedar Rapids office for Heart and Solutions. I earned my master's at the University of Northern Iowa in clinical mental health counseling, and I've been assisting clients since 2016.
Awesome. Thank you, Molly. And for those that don't know me, I am the vice president at Heart and Solutions on the therapy side of things. I've been with Heart and Solutions since October of 2015. My doctorate is in counselor education and supervision with an emphasis in trauma. I've been a registered play therapist since 2015 and a play therapy supervisor since 2019. So outside of work, I have a chaotic life with my husband and two little girls and our black lab named Jim, whose person name only causes a little bit of confusion sometimes. And for the sake of this as well, I'm not sure if I mention it later, but I am a CrossFit level 1 coach. So coming into this training with the mental health background that I have, but also that is kind of my fitness modality of choice and where a lot of my experience comes from. And I'm excited to have Molly here. She's got some similarities and some differences in her movements of choice. And so really excited to be able to incorporate all of that knowledge. Objectives for today, fairly straightforward, but we hope exciting and beneficial. Learning about what trauma-informed weightlifting is. What is it? Where did it come from? What are those foundational principles of trauma-informed weightlifting, trauma-informed movement? Helping participants be able to identify the pillars of self-care, how those relate to fitness-specific modalities. And also exploring some interventions related to integrating that weightlifting and movement piece into our trauma-informed work with clients. So not only inside of a gym or fitness center, but in our offices and even via telehealth, how can we incorporate these movement pieces for clients who are either actively involved in a movement practice or bring the intentionality to session that they want to become involved in movement. So again, we are so glad that you are here. And I want to start today off with some principles that really came to us from an incredible training that Molly and I were able to take called Trauma-Informed Weightlifting. And we will talk at length about that training and Mariah and Candace and the founders of what is trademarked as Trauma-Informed Weightlifting out of the Center for Trauma and Embodiment. And one of the things that really stood out to us that I really want to make sure we are pulling forward is that we often approach trauma-informed work with the mindset of do no harm. But it's really critical to understand that there are times that we will cause harm to our clients. And while that harm may not be intentional and that harm isn't always harmful, we really need to be mindful that going in with a blanket statement of we're going to do no harm is not beneficial to us or our clients. And so one of the things that they really talk about as one of their guiding principles there is first do less harm and then do good. And so we do the least amount of harm we can intentionally do, and then we do good. And so, like I said, that harm isn't always harmful either. It can sometimes help us find something out about our clients, whether those are counseling clients or whether we're training with people in the gym. The trainers and coaches that we talk about today, they're not doing therapy, right? They're not therapists. And even if they are, they should not be doing therapy if they're training clients. So we'll talk about those dual relationships and how to manage those. But if pieces come out in their movement practice that they recognize as being harmful or they share we're uncomfortable, those pieces can really help us move forward with that information so that we are approaching that movement practice from a trauma-informed standpoint. And so we're going to approach this training today with these concepts in mind. We're going to help all of you learn a little bit more about working with clients who are coming into the room with so many different experiences. Some of those clients that come into our offices may be aware of their traumas. Some may not. Some may want to talk about their trauma and some may not. However, we do want you to know about anyone who's interested in fitness or movement as wanting to get better, right? So nobody says, oh, I want to start a fitness journey or continue a fitness journey without a goal of getting better, right? Whether that getting better is at the gym or in life or it's something else entirely. And so it's our responsibility to not ignore their trauma and expect them to reach these goals to the fullest. We cannot, and we'll talk about this more, but we cannot reach any of those goals without acknowledging that trauma impacts the work that they're doing and how we can approach that work. So what is trauma, right? And I think a lot of us are probably entering this space today with at least a basic understanding of what trauma is. And at its core, right, trauma is that emotional response to an event like an accident or a sexual assault or natural disaster. It's how your body and brain react to a stressful situation. I think incredibly relevant to today's training as well is understanding that in addition to these life-altering, life-threatening events, trauma at its core is a violation of our boundaries. And we're going to talk a lot today about boundaries and how to regain a sense of autonomy and agency over talking about our boundaries and holding our boundaries. We're also going to talk a lot about our nervous system, and Molly's going to dive into some of that. But one thing that's really critical is understanding the thought that we can't process our trauma if we feel as if we're still living it. And we'll see this theme surface a lot today. And it's something that a wonderful author, Laura Kadari, who we'll talk a lot about today, discusses, right? And all of this work that she was doing in her own fitness journey following a traumatic event, and then came to the realization of, oh, my body still thinks that I'm in trauma. My body is still not sure that I'm recovered. And so we'll talk a lot about, does your nervous system know that you survived? And have we communicated that with our nervous system? And trauma is stored somatically, right? We've some wonderful, wonderful resources, right? Probably one of the most infamous being The Body Keeps the Score, right? And understanding that trauma is stored somatically in our body and it's experienced as emotions, but also sensations. And so having some movement practices in one capacity or another is critical to healing. Just making sure that that we're cognizant of what these traumas may present like. And one thing I talk to our coaches at the gym about too is, like we talked about before, clients may know, oh, hey, this really difficult thing happened to me. This is my trauma. Or clients may not, and they may enter a situation where they're not quite sure, like, did I experience trauma? Was that trauma? Is that trauma valid? What is that? Like, and so especially in a gym setting, if someone presents as unsure or timid, right, they might not think they're capable of doing things in the gym. They might not feel comfortable wearing certain clothing. They might not feel as if they can do something, even though we think that they can, or the coach thinks that they can. It's critical to remember from this trauma-informed lens that pushing them to do this when they don't feel like they can is not the answer. And so taking all of these things into account as we go throughout the training today, and really being mindful of, we're going to talk a lot about agency and respecting where the client is at, the same way that we do when we're working with their trauma in the office, right? Of, okay, we're not going there today, even though I think you might be ready, or I think it might be beneficial, or I can see this, how this treatment plan lays out. It's a similar concept in the gym space as well. So what is trauma-informed fitness, right? That's why we're all here today. It's what we all want to know about. Essentially, it's taking trauma-informed care practices and implementing them in a fitness setting. And so it's helping us heal trauma that's stored. And so using that movement and that fitness pattern to promote, like we talked about, that somatic regulation. Really looking at gaining some interoceptive awareness, right? So how can we take all these things that we're feeling in our body and in our mind and regulate those and do something with them? I think it comes up on a later slide, right? But one of the things that both Mariah and Laura talk about in their trainings is this concept of, hey, we can leave unsafe situations, right? For the most part, when we are outside of trauma, we're doing our recovery work, we go somewhere it doesn't feel safe, we can change that setting, we can leave the environment. We can't leave our brains, right? We can't leave our bodies. And so helping us gain a sense of control over our bodies through fitness. Weightlifting has a large impact on our interoceptive awareness. We don't have a choice, right? When we are moving, especially when we add the component of weights and heavy objects and big things, we have to pay attention to our body. And we'll talk a little bit later today about what they refer to as a forced meditation, right? But a forced sense of, okay, I've got to pay attention to what's going on with my body right now and how I feel and what I need. It also activates our stress response in a safe way versus those unsafe environments. So we'll talk about how to establish a sense of safety in our chosen place of fitness, and coming at it from that trauma-informed lens allows us to experience successes and failures and discomfort and great feelings in a place that is safe to do that. And as we learn to control how we're thinking and feeling about ourselves as we're moving objects and moving through space, we learn to become tolerant of feelings and emotions, even ones that were negative. We learn to be okay with failure. We learn to be okay with trying things that we may not be successful at.
And I love the concept of interoceptive awareness, right? When working with clients, a lot of trauma stems from the loss of control, right? The breaking through of their boundaries, and using weightlifting or exercise in general, you have total control. It allows clients to regain their power, their autonomy, and what they will say yes and no to. And I just think it's a super interesting concept.
So as we dive into, right, what is trauma-informed fitness, I just wanted to take a second and recognize that some people here may not have a clue what weightlifting is, what those terms are, some of the things that we'll refer to. today. And while we don't need an extensive background and history on all of them, I do think it's important to understand some of the differences in terms, because our clients may come with all sorts of ranges of experience, right? And as much as someone may struggle with, hey, I know nothing about fitness space and I want to create a movement routine and I want to start and I don't know where to start, it can be equally as difficult for clients who may have a very well established movement pattern, trying to find someone who gets it right and who understands why they want to keep doing that thing or how to communicate about that thing. So Olympic weightlifting is a term that we hear kind of in commonplace, and it's the oldest of the strength sports. It's called Olympic weightlifting because it's the only one of what we would consider a strength sport that's in the Olympics. So it includes 3 primary weightlifting movements, and I've got some pictures on the next page just to give some visuals of what those may look like if you have clients that are talking about them. But the snatch, the clean, and the jerk, and it's taking a heavy barbell and moving it from the ground to overhead, right? A couple things that I really like to highlight about Olympic weightlifting is it's the oldest of the strength sports. It's been in the Olympics for a long, long time. Women were not allowed to participate until the year 2000 at the Olympics in Olympic weightlifting. And they couldn't compete in other Olympic weightlifting type events until the late 80s. And so we've seen a huge growth in all of these sports, but especially for women in these sports over the last 10 years or so. And so, things like social media have been really influential in that, and getting to see some other individuals participate in those, getting exposure to what those could be. Powerlifting it's kind of the prep work for Olympic weightlifting. So it includes a back squat, so a heavy barbell on the back, a bench press, and a deadlift. And so other types of lifting. Bodybuilding really entails a lot of similar movements, but it may be done very differently because it's focused on aesthetics versus pure strength output. So they may do lower strength work with higher reps. They may be working some of the smaller muscle groups. Really created in the early 2000s in California, and it was just kind of grassroots organization of, hey, we want to incorporate some fitness. But one of the things that really comes to mind when we think about kind of the trauma-informed approach and a style like CrossFit is that you're doing something hard with another person. And their motto, their mission, right, is that it's constantly varied functional movements performed at high intensity, but it's done in that community setting. And so there's always that support of somebody else who, okay, I'm going through this really, really difficult workout, this different thing. It's incorporating what we would consider kind of typical cardio with the strength training component. But I've got somebody else who gets it, who's there, who's going through it with me. And then kind of our global style gym. So when people think of a gym, this is probably one of the first things they think of, right? So a Planet Fitness, Anytime Fitness, the YMCA, really that wonderful baseline of general strength and resistance training. There's more flexibility with that. These clients may be doing their own programming or trying to figure out what programming looks like, and we'll talk about why that's important later. They may or may not have a routine established for them by a coach. They may be kind of going into that on their own, depending on what they're doing in those settings. I think the other thing too that I always just like to touch on, especially with Olympic weightlifting, because it blows my mind, is they did a study on the need for mobility of all Olympic sports, and second only to gymnastics was Olympic weightlifting. So we kind of think of these like huge, strong individuals who have the highest levels of need for mobility amongst all the other athletes, other than the gymnast in the Olympics. So that fact, I guess, always just blows my mind. But it also, I think, really speaks to the movement patterns we'll talk about today and why understanding all of our body awareness is so important. It's not just moving heavy things quickly. It's doing that in a way that supports the healing of all of our body. So this is just some images of what this looks like, right? So in the top left, that's that Olympic weightlifting snatch position that we talked about. A clean underneath that, down at the bottom left, some powerlifting, deadlift, in the middle, at the bottom right, some CrossFit gym photos, right? That community feel. Everybody's kind of, it's not pretty, but everybody's in there. The top right is the picture. Her name is Rory, and she is one of the youngest record-setting Olympic weightlifters in the world. She is incredible. I think she just turned 10, but she has been a rock star for years now. I'm going to butcher her last name, so I won't try it today, but she is incredible. And then the aesthetics and the bodybuilding that we talked about in the middle center there. So just kind of some visuals of what clients may be bringing to their experience or wanting to add to their experience.
So when we talk about trauma-informed weightlifting, right, and we talk about the basis of what trauma is, we have to understand how it's formed, what it's doing to the brain, because trauma changes our brain. And so where we start is our brainstem. It's the lowest part of our brain development, right? It's that the oldest, the fight or flight, and it controls our responses to survival, those automatic responses to if we feel startled or we have that fight if someone does come around the corner and scares us, and those responses to breathing and sleep and our temperature. The limbic system, two really important areas are the amygdala and the hippocampus, right? And so it acts like the amygdala, it comes and acts like the brain's smoke detector, in joining with the hippocampus, and it connects our lower and upper parts of the brain. And these are important when we're expressing our emotion, if we're in our memory formation. So when it comes down to trauma, how we respond to trauma reactions, what we remember of our trauma versus what we don't. And then the final piece is the neocortex, right? This upper part of the brain develops last and is responsible for our ability to pause, to think, reflect, concentrate, and to problem solve. During trauma or a trigger response to trauma, that is the first part of the brain that usually goes offline, right? Because we're in a very survival mode, which we will talk about the reactions to trauma later on in the presentation, but it's an important part to understand where these responses come from when we're working with clients. Negative health outcomes of trauma. So when we think of the different ways in which we see our clients talk about, express either their symptoms or things that they've experienced, we can see a lot of either depression, their just functional impairment in general, right? The memory fog, brain fog, cardiovascular disease, concerns with the heart, lungs, chest. Chronic pain throughout the entire body, right? A big function of the book, The Body Keeps the Score, talks a lot about how our body remembers a lot of the trauma we experience, and that can be released as chronic pain. Increased risk of metabolic disorders, inflammatory diseases, IBS in the stomach, body image disorders, a large piece of any sort of body modification, training, movement can come, especially with athletes, can come with body dysmorphia, thinking that they see something that is or is not there, and that can stem from trauma as well. Emotional dysregulation, disordered eating, pain-related disabilities, and or weight gain or weight loss. That all comes with these health outcomes with the trauma that we or our clients experience.
And I think it's really important to be mindful too, that these health outcomes can be a result of the somatic storing of the trauma. And sometimes these health outcomes can be a direct result of the trauma that happened themselves. And so kind of working with clients to explore, are these direct results of a traumatic event that, we were in a car accident that caused functional impairment or limb differences or things like that, or are we storing? And sometimes it's a combination of both. And so being aware of what those health outcomes may be and sort of what those mean for each individual client.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the mind-body connection of trauma, right? So we talked about this a little bit at the beginning of, especially when we are moving heavy objects, the awareness of what's happening to our mind and our body and the connection between them is critical. And so we are expanding our awareness of, okay, what's going on with our vagal tone, our parasympathetic nervous system. All of those pieces are activated, they're heightened, they're paying attention to things that, when done correctly, can be healing, when done incorrectly, can mimic a traumatic event. And so being really mindful of giving clients the agency and autonomy to alter, end, or otherwise edit a lifting session to help them start to recognize, and we're going to talk about the window of tolerance here shortly, right? But start to recognize, okay, what's going on? How am I feeling? What do I have control over? What do I need? Mm-hmm. So the 4 R's of a trauma-informed approach, and quite honestly, you can find 4 R's, you can find 6 R's, you can find lots of R's, lots of other kind of helpful tips and tricks and tidbits about a trauma-informed approach. This is by no means the end-all be-all only kind of mnemonic device to recognize and remember how to implement a trauma-informed approach. This one happens to be from SAMHSA, but realization about the trauma and how it can affect people in groups, right? Trauma is a thing. Trauma can impact people. The same traumatic event can impact multiple people in multiple different ways. So just that realization about all of the ways that trauma can show up and what that effect can look like. Recognizing the signs of trauma. And so being, and we're going to talk about those, and particularly how those present potentially in a gym setting as well. But recognizing, okay, is this client just being difficult, or is this client having a trauma response right now? Is this client avoiding something because they don't want to do it? Or is this client having a trauma response right now? Our response, right? So having a system that can respond to trauma. What are the steps that we're able to take that are in place? I was just listening to, and I don't have it in this training yet. Now I'm really sad, but I was just listening to another podcast, and I'm gonna have to look it up now. It's gonna bug me, but this gentleman was talking about he's creating a whole trauma-informed gym. And Molly, if you've listened to this one, please let me know. But he literally is diving into research on not just, oh, I want to build a gym. What equipment do I need? He is soundproofing his gym in a way that will minimize all of the additional noise that could frighten someone when they're in a trauma response. He has a rule in this gym space that nothing, like no water bottles, no shirts, nothing is allowed on the gym floor, because he does a lot of work with military veterans who may see that object as a threat if they are pushed outside their window of tolerance. And that could be seen as any number of, explosive devices or just an unknown threat. So they're really cognizant of keeping the gym floor clean. Things like music choices, things, paint colors. He has a ton of natural plants growing in his gym to help with the oxygen, because he wants it to literally feel different and breathe different in this gym. I haven't gotten to see pictures yet. As he was talking about, I was like, I want to see this space. But, at the same time, he was discussing, he had just ordered 2,000 pounds of free weights. He's like, this is a gym in every sense of the gym, except we're approaching this work from a very trauma-informed standpoint. And it sounds like an incredible concept. But he is well aware of his response and what that system in that space can be. And then resisting intentional re-traumatization, right? We talked at the beginning of today's training that we can't promise to do no harm, but we can do less harm. And we can be intentional in what we're doing, and minimizing the chances for re-traumatization, and most definitely eliminating intentional re-traumatization. So kind of along those same lines, right? Establishing safety. Judith Herman proposed 3 stages to trauma recovery. We're not going to get into all of them today, but most relevant for today is that idea of establishing safety and stabilization first. We do that in our sessions with clients, right? We want to allow them to do it. If we're not the ones, right? If we're not their coaches at the gym, we want to allow them the tools to be able to establish that safety in whatever environment they choose. And going back, to the explanation Molly gave earlier about our brain and how interconnected that is. When we feel safe, that prefrontal cortex activates. And that allows us to access thoughts and feelings and basic functions. And like Molly told us earlier, right, when we feel threatened, that prefrontal cortex comes off, right? Our limbic system takes over. We're not able to make rational thoughts. And so establishing that safety and stabilization is critical to being able to make the decisions needed to make, both to heal therapeutically and to lift and move the way that clients will want to. Pulling off of that, right? Like that initial safety and stabilization, exercise gives us an opportunity to do that. And so it gives us a chance to gain a sense of agency and autonomy over our body. For some clients, they may have never had that. So we're giving them an opportunity to learn how to create that and what that feels like. For others, they may have had that and had it taken away from that traumatic event. Like we talked about, that violation of their boundaries. Lifting in itself increases our feelings of safety and empowerment. There is some incredible sense of power that comes with knowing I can move that, I can lift that, I can do that. Both from a physical, like if I'm in danger, I know I can run at this speed, or I can lift this thing, or I could do these things. And also just the emotional sense of I am powerful. And so lifting in itself really helps clients start to create that sense of safety.
So what is trauma-informed weightlifting? As an embodied practice, an intervention that's informed by the latest in neuroscience, physiology, and trauma research. Trauma-informed weightlifting seeks to transform weightlifting and movement in an effort to both promote and facilitate healing for trauma-impacted individuals and communities. Looks like we've got a little video.
Yeah, I've got a short video linked here. And it does include some of the presenters that Molly and I have been able to train with. It's a news segment, so news segments are what they are. But I think that it gives us a really good short dive into some of the things that we're talking about, especially before we really get into the nitty-gritty of what all of this looks like. Just to, again, I know we showed some visuals of the lifts earlier, but I like the visuals in here just to kind of see, especially for those who may not have a background, may not have a movement practice of their own, or may have a movement practice that's very different from weightlifting. So we will cross our fingers and hope that this works.
Are dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. It's often the result of going through or witnessing a life-threatening event like war, a natural disaster, or an assault. The symptoms of PTSD, like flashbacks and heightened fear of danger, can disrupt daily life and contribute to long-term health issues. But many people with PTSD are finding relief through a common form of exercise. Barry Peterson has the story.
When you see Candace Lager and Mariah Rooney in a Denver area gym, it's not a run-of-the-mill workout. They're co-directors of trauma-informed weightlifting, teaching coaches how to use weight training to help trauma survivors.
When you have experienced such horrible things that tell you that maybe you don't matter, you're not strong, that you don't have the right to make choices over your own body, it's a pretty powerful thing to then be able to move in a way that really taps into strength.
If I can do this, I can control other parts of what's happening to me.
Absolutely, absolutely.
PTSD causes elevated stress hormones, often trapping a person in fight or flight mode. Exercises like this barbell back squat might disrupt that.
Doing something like that could allow someone to just focus on the movement and develop a better connection to what their body is doing in that mode.
Is this a kind of a message of doing this exercise also means you're in control, as opposed to the things that may have happened to you from outside of your body?
In a lot of ways, yes. It can feel like you're in control when you are carrying weight or pushing weight or pressing things or lifting things.
But there is another message here about holding weights behind you, says Dr. James Whitworth of the Veterans Administration Boston Healthcare System and a researcher on trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder. The benefit of that is that you maybe feel fearful about what's coming up behind you because of an experience you had, and this gives you a sense of control or power over that process. Is that a fairly good example of why this weight training can help shift how you feel about trauma and post-traumatic stress?
I think that's a good example, Barry, and using powerful movements that make people feel strong could be one of those benefits.
While serving as a platoon sergeant in Iraq, he first connected exercise with trauma therapy.
I would exercise with my fellow soldiers to blow off steam, to deal with the stressors of combat. But it wasn't until I lost one of my friends and soldiers, battle buddies, to suicide that I really got interested in trauma, PTSD, and how exercise might be helpful for people suffering from PTSD.
Now, he's focusing on weightlifting as a therapy. It's almost like seeing can reshape believing. Seeing the growing muscle helps in believing you have greater inner strength.
It is an opportunity to disrupt some of those cognitive distortions and negative views of themselves that may have arisen as a result of their trauma.
In a Philadelphia gym, trainer Jessica Brock-Pitts works with Heather DeWar.
When you have trauma, you can get very disconnected from your body, and using strength training movements to help get more in your body and aware of how things feel in your body and how these different sensations feel can be really helpful.
Heather believes the results are helping resolve her trauma.
I think that I'm on the way, for sure. Gaining trust in my body, gaining awareness of my body is laying a strong foundation towards resolution for me.
Let's warm up with about 5-6 reps.
Jessica teaches from her own experience.
I am a survivor of trauma myself, and I was not always like an athletic person or kid. So then I stumbled across the trauma-informed weightlifting training and was like, oh man, this is for me.
The connection between exercise and good health is long-standing, but using resistance training as a coping strategy for PTSD symptoms is still being studied and may take a while to gain acceptance. I'm curious, when you started looking at this research and thinking about this, did your colleagues think you were just a little crazy?
That's a fun question, but I would say no.
So when you talk about this at a dinner party, people actually take you seriously. They don't like just brush you off.
Absolutely.
In fact, not brushed off, but increasingly available, where coaches with specific training can use heavy weights to lighten the weight of trauma on a person's soul. For CBS Saturday Morning, Barry Peterson, Denver.
Hey, listen, if it works.
I was just going to say,
great,
isn't
right?
it like whatever it takes? And it seems like the more stories we see and the more we do, it's each person that's dealing with PTSD in different forms, it does take something different.
Everybody handles it differently. Everybody
Exactly.
deals with it differently.
Yeah. And weight training just overall is a great form of exercise and can help,
of course,
with like making you.
So I almost like, there's a part of me that's always tempted to cut off the end there when it goes back to the commentators, right? Because I'm like, but I think that it's so important to hear that, because that really is where this field is at right now. And so when they're like, oh, whatever it takes, like we're telling them, like, I don't know. It just sounds like they're looking at this news story and going, I don't believe any of this, but cool. Like if that's what helps. And I think it really gives a good example of the work that is left to do, and how new this concept is for people to grasp and sort of, I don't want to say the uphill battle, but the uphill battle, and understanding, where clients may be at as well. Like I'm sitting here going, okay, if I was watching, I'd be like, oh, cool. I want to weight train to help with trauma. And then if I'm watching the end and I go, oh, but maybe people won't take it seriously. And maybe this is just some joke, right? Like, I don't know. So there's always a part of me that's like, I don't want to hear them say that, but I think it's really important. Because for me, it just highlights some of those barriers that we still have to work through when we're talking about a trauma-informed approach to fitness and getting others to recognize the sincerity of the intervention and the benefit. So why movement, right? They talked about this a little bit in the video as well. And this is just a quote from Danielle Friedman, but and mainly because I couldn't say it any better than she did here. But for many, the sport's healing powers come down from the fact that where trauma has left them feeling helpless, powerless, weak, lifting helps them feel strong, right? Not only physically, but also psychologically. So we talked about that, right? Like, oh, like somebody's told me I can't, or somebody's told me my body's not good enough, or somebody's done something to hurt my body or take away my strength, or I was in an accident and I couldn't move my body for a while, or whatever the case may be. I want to get that back, right? I want to feel powerful. I want to feel strong. I want to do something that somebody, thought that I couldn't. And movement gives us an opportunity to do that. Okay. So this is an intervention. And this intervention comes from a wonderful book. It's referenced at the end, but it's called Lifting Heavy Things. I mentioned Laura Kadari's name earlier. It's one of my, it is absolutely an incredible resource. But I want to do part of this intervention with everybody now, because I think that it's so relevant. And just, I know we talk all the time in clinical settings of not having clients do anything that we wouldn't do. And we won't go through all of it. I think steps 3 and 4 can be done at your own time. But even thinking about why we're at this training today, right? And so Laura talks about conducting your own intake, right? And understanding why we're here, right? And for clients, what this journey means to them. And so they come to you in a session and they say, hey, I want to start going to the gym, or I want to be more intentional at the gym. And so how do we help them kind of realize where they're at and what they need? Fairly straightforward, right? A piece of paper, a writing utensil. They can set an optional timer. But those first 2 pieces, right? I'm going to read through all 4 of these stages, but I will give some space, especially for those first 2, for us to engage in this. But like I said, in this exercise, Laura really invites us to conduct an intake so that as clients move forward with their own training needs and goals, and as we move forward through this training program, we'll know what conditions are needed. So you'll know what you need and what resources you have and what your goals are. And so you can get out a piece of paper, or you can just think silently for these first couple pieces. But identifying your 3 main reasons for training. So thinking about, I want you to write down all the reasons that you are considering training. And like I said, for the sake of today, this may be, hey, I want my own movement journey, or why am I at this training? What are all of my reasons? So I'd like you to write down anything that comes to mind. Do not censor yourself. Do not edit anything. Please just take time to write down anything that comes to mind. And I'll give us just another kind of minute and a half for this part, but writing down any reason that you are interested in exploring what trauma-informed weightlifting may mean for you personally or in your work. And we won't share these, so please be honest with yourself. Excellent. And once you have that list there, I want you to circle the first three things that feel achievable. Or things that you think you could make measurable progress on in the next 3 months. So things that feel doable. And again, I don't want you to overthink that. Just kind of circle the three that stand out, kind of jump out to you. And this is important because acknowledging why you want to make that change in your life isn't easy. And so sometimes our intuition really is key to making that process feel more realistic. So not overthinking it, and just kind of looking at what are those three pieces I could make progress on. If I was doing this with a client, right, I would ask them to hold on to that list and put it somewhere where they can access it again, because we would refer to it later. But next I'd ask them to do a similar practice, right? And on a piece of paper, just brainstorm the conditions that they would need if I was working with a client, to begin a training routine. And so even here, what do I need to begin maybe incorporating this work with clients? Some prompts that I may give clients are, what are some of your environmental needs, right? So what kind of facility do I want? How far do I want it to be from my home? How much space do I need? What kind of equipment do I want to have access to? Do I need certain clothing or footwear or access to music? Do I need or want formal training, a program to follow? What kind of coaching do you want? Or do you want group support or individual work? What time of day would you need to train? What do your meal times look like? Do you need somewhere to be able to change or shower? Do you require gender neutral changing rooms or showers? Do you require elevators or ramps if the facility is not at street level? Would you require that the space be able to uphold explicit commitment to inclusivity? So thinking about all of the conditions that would make training accessible for that client. And then similar to the first list, once that list is, and I don't want to say complete, so we'd set a time limit on that list as well, but then circling anything that is a must-have as opposed to a would like to have. It's also okay to circle everything on that list, but really circling those must-have conditions. From there, I'd work with clients to consider the things that they already have that support their needs. So we want to be able to put those conditions into place for them. So looking at that list of must-haves, and then exploring maybe the things they already have. Do they already have a gym membership or access to a gym? Do they have any equipment or access to equipment? So things like maybe even resistance bands or dumbbells, even odd objects. There's many fitness instructors that talk about during COVID-19 and being at home, using books and backpacks and other odd objects as weight. Even water jugs. And so thinking about what do they have access to? Do they have access to the music that they want or a way to play the sounds that they need? And putting check marks next to each condition that they do have in place right now without needing to do anything. So what conditions could they take action on right now? And then circling the ones they still need to figure out. So there may be some conditions that they need to do some additional research on. There may be some conditions they need to save some money for, or they may say, I've got the money, I need to just go buy that, or I need to look into some programs. And so making a plan to put each condition into place. And just like we do with treatment plans, giving this plan a concrete step and action date, right? What is my next action and when am I going to do that? And those are pieces that we can follow up with in the therapeutic environment. So they may have some conditions that are already in place, and then they may have some they're working on with us. And lastly, really similar to a RAP, or what we call a wellness recovery action plan, we want to help them identify their resources. So who or what are the things that support them in their life, especially who may support them as they pursue goals related to movement and fitness. So some prompts I may ask there, right? What are hobbies or activities that you enjoy doing? Who supports you in your life? Do you have any pets? If so, tell me about them, name them, identify them. Did you ever play a sport? If so, which one? Do you like to dance? If yes, which kind? What's your favorite kind of music? Do you have a spiritual practice? Do you volunteer at any clubs or organizations, or have any memberships? Do you have someone from who you obtain regular counseling, right? And that may be more like their gym coach, may ask them, or we want to make sure they are committed to a counseling practice of some sort. Do they have any tokens with special meaning, anything that is important for them to carry with them or have with them? And helping clients keep these lists similar, again, to what we would do with a treatment plan, right? This is their trauma-informed fitness treatment plan. What are the things that they need, and how can we help them really get started on this journey? Right? I alluded to this earlier, but it's one of it's one of my favorite pieces when we think about kind of using a movement practice. And one thing, I've said it, Molly's known me for years, I've said this for years, and I really never understood what it meant for me when I said it. But I would always, when I was talking to clients about coping skills, or supervisees about reviewing coping skills with clients, I'd say, Dad, don't tell me to do yoga, right? Like, it's such a common coping skill that people throw out there. And I'd be like, Dad, don't ask me to do that. And I had never really given much thought as to why. I just knew I didn't like it. And I always kind of felt like an oddity. And then I started diving into research for this training, and I was like, I'm not alone, right? This is a thing. And this is okay to not love quiet meditation. But it doesn't mean we don't want to intentionally check out, right? But meditation doesn't have to mean sitting still. And so any type of movement can be meditative movement. And again, I had these experiences. I've been CrossFitting for about 6 years. And so, well before I even had a clue what I was doing, I would have these workouts where I was like, I just kind of went into a zone, right? Like, I don't know what was going on. I used to joke, I blacked out, right? Like, kind of sometimes the more painful the workout was, I was like, yeah, it's fine, just black out. I was actively meditating, right? And my body was going into a space during these workouts, similar to how others may go into a space during a quiet yoga meditation. And I didn't know, because I in my brain, I don't meditate, right? I'm not somebody who does that. I was doing that in a way that worked for my body. We're going to orienting a lot later, but Molly, I'll let you give an overview of it now so that when we circle back, it makes sense.
Absolutely. So when we talk about orienting ourselves within a space, right, we're looking at the awareness of just ourselves within the space, our needs within the space. And we included this really helpful intervention for 5 things. So it's you can use this yourself, you can teach clients to do this, but using this when you're feeling overwhelmed within a space. entering for some clients who are new to lifting or movement, right, or entering into just a gym atmosphere, that can be incredibly intimidating, or can activate triggers that they have at that time. And so helping them to feel comfortable and to regain the power to take up space, and to take up the space that they are in. And so when we're feeling overwhelmed within our space around us, right? So we want to look around for 5 blue things. It can be whatever you want it to be. But for this example, it's 5 blue things. And looking not just in front of you, but to your left, right, behind you, right, really orienting to where you are. I like that this really ties back to the video that we watched previously about how clients can be doing back squats, right? And they at first may not enjoy that movement for fear that someone is behind them, they can't see, but being able to actively orient themselves within the space, and so that they can heal in that and know that no one's behind them, either their coaches or they can actively see in a mirror what they're doing, but regaining just their confidence within that space. And so looking around for 5 blue things, and then you'll repeat to look at 5 yellow things, 5 red things, repeat as needed with different colors or shapes or sizes, whatever the client needs, until you feel grounded in that moment to be able to participate in any movements that you're doing. But I even think of this as just orienting yourself within the movement that you're doing, right? You're actively, like Colleen was talking about, with hard workouts, we joke about, oh, just black out, you'll be fine. But what we're saying there is you are actively meditating to perform a movement that helps you to feel strong, right? So in a deadlift, right, we're can be working towards lifting quite a heavy amount of weight. And that moment of standing up and then releasing the weight back to the ground is incredibly therapeutic, in that you are releasing that tension, but it's also knowing what's around you, where you are, and feeling safe within that space.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that orientation is so critical to being able to feel safe enough to do this, right? And so going back to, that guiding principle of establishing safety, orienting ourselves to that space, whether it's our own home or a gym or somewhere new, being able to know where we're at, to feel safe enough to do the things that are important to us. So like I said, it doesn't have to be yoga, right? And this is something that, again, I shared, personally, was very beneficial to me, but I think allowing other people to hear that as well. And yoga can be incredibly helpful for some people. There are people with incredible yoga practices, and it is a phenomenal movement tool. But thinking about yoga can also be really traumatizing for others. And so Peter Levine is a fabulous resource when it comes to trauma, and thinking about during yoga, right? Some trauma survivors may experience an increase in intrusive thoughts or flashbacks. We're doing a seated meditation, and we're voluntarily, right, being asked to make ourselves immobile, right? And being immobile can feel like fear. And so that, while for some people that can be incredibly relaxing and, like, I'm not moving, I'm just laying here. For those with certain trauma histories, right, that can be incredibly triggering, and can activate those fear responses due to the immobility. Weightlifting alternatively cues our body about how movement should feel. And so, like we talked about the term of forced meditation. You got to see Mariah and Candace in that video snippet, but they are the two that we took our 30 hour training with. But they talk about, there's no better way to force you to pay attention to your body than throwing, a 200-pound back squat on. Like, you put me in a yoga room, I'm going to lay there and I'm going to be thinking about what I need to do at work or what groceries I need to buy or what's going on. If I do that while weightlifting, one, I'm missing the lift, which is no big deal, but two, it becomes increasingly unsafe for me, right? The second I feel that weight on me, and I am forced into a meditative state where I'm not letting intrusive thoughts come into my brain so that I can move the weight the way that I want to. And so thinking about it from that standpoint, right? And the other thing, and Laura does a great job in her book highlighting, she had a wonderful yoga practice. And she has a whole chapter on it, but talks about how at some point it became not enough. And in particular, after her trauma, it became not enough for her. But thinking about the similarities between yoga and weightlifting. And I think at first thought, it's like, what are you talking about? Right. But she uses this wonderful example of what we call an RDL, a Romanian deadlift, and a warrior 3 pose. Right. So if we are in a yoga practice, we're doing a warrior pose, right? And we're balancing on one leg and our arms are out. When we move that into the weight room, we're doing a Romanian deadlift, right? And side by side, those movements are incredibly similar, with the added forced meditative standpoint of that weight on the bar and being able to feel that pull.
And I'd like to add here too, Colleen, in the gym world, right, of mind to muscle movement. And I feel like that plays a role also in that interceptive control, right? Of when we are lifting or moving, we can feel those muscles activating. And that, again, forces you to pay attention to what you are doing. Because if you're working on building a particular muscle or shape or whatever it is that you want, you are looking for that and paying attention that you are doing the right movement to activate that particular muscle or area of the body.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't think I get into it in this training because we really need about 8 hours, I think, for this training. But the same way we can experience and store trauma somatically in the body and have sensations related to that trauma, we can store essentially elements of dissociation. And so I work with individuals who have been impacted by various physical illnesses and had multiple surgeries. And there are pieces where, okay, I'm weightlifting, but this movement, I don't feel it right, or I don't get it right. And we almost have to help them return on the parts of the body that have dissociated from the trauma. And so helping them do various movements to start to give the body permission to feel in that spot again. So we definitely can see that somatic presentation on both ends of the spectrum. And again, it doesn't have to be yoga, but it also doesn't have to be weightlifting, right? So people who have experienced trauma often avoid exercise entirely because it can generate a physical stress response. So our pulse gets faster, we breathe heavier, our body temperature rises. Those can be trauma reminders for many people. And so we really are in a unique position to be able to help them explore various types of exercise and movement that feel right for them. And that movement journey may fluctuate and alter as they heal from their trauma. I have some wonderful people that were doing a lot of stuff in the CrossFit space during and after a traumatic event, but then similar to how Laura talks about, hey, yoga wasn't enough. There are some individuals that I'm close to that have moved into more of a powerlifting stance, right? Some of the elements of CrossFit weren't connecting with their body in the way that felt good to them anymore after their trauma. And so helping clients kind of navigate that journey and supporting them in finding movement that isn't triggering for them and really works to embody them versus re-traumatize them. When we do think about lifting, though. One of the things that again, going back to Laura's book, one of the things she does a great job talking about, especially through her own self-disclosure and journey of moving from yoga to lifting, is it also gives us intentional pauses, right? So as we're moving through sets, as we're lifting that barbell, like Molly talked about on a deadlift, if we're coming up and down, it builds in space for individuals to check in with themselves. Okay, how did that squat feel? The programming says I'm supposed to add some weight. Do I feel like I want to add weight? Do I want to stay where I'm at? Do I want to take some off? Like, how's my body feeling? Weightlifting programming is very intentional in those breaks and pauses, which can really help clients stay within their window of tolerance for that day. It can really give them a great sense of how to protect themselves from becoming overwhelmed, versus some workouts maybe that are, thinking of some really wonderful, group fitness classes or something where clients are like, but I'm embarrassed to step out of that workout if the whole group is still going, right? Or people may notice if I pause or if I change something. Weightlifting gives a lot of space for those intentional check-ins. That said, growth is impossible without discomfort. And so how can we, from a trauma-informed lens, help our clients safely feel uncomfortable? We can do it through movement. We can create a space in which, again, we can safely allow them to feel uncomfortable. And from the clinical standpoint, right, we do this with interventions in a clinical sense as well. Okay, we've established rapport. We have a sense of safety. We've taught you some grounding work. You've got, right, and you know how to orient yourself in the gym space. You know what conditions you need to be successful. Okay, so now what? Right? Exercise of all kinds can be beneficial. We've talked about that. We do know from a research-based perspective that the most benefit can be found in that moderate to high intensity training. So including weightlifting, also high intensity resistance training. With sleep quality and anxiety, right? Reducing those, which are often, symptoms resulting from traumatic events. And so wanting to re-regulate that body. But again, the first part of trauma recovery is being able to feel safe in your body so that you can feel safe in your environment. We talked about that earlier, right? I cannot escape my body as much as I may want to, and as much as I may have learned to dissociate if I've got a trauma response. I cannot physically leave my body, and it may not always be safe for me to dissociate. So how can I teach myself to start to feel safe in that? Because when I don't, it can look a lot of different ways. And Molly, I can let you kind of talk about some of these trauma responses because they don't look the same. In fact, some of these can look inappropriate and not make sense when we don't go back to that, those 4 R's of recognizing trauma responses.
Absolutely. And, historically we've had these, the fight, flight, or freeze responses, or we notice these in ourselves, our clients, or people that we just know personally, in their response to trauma or triggers, right? So the classic of fight is it can be physical aggression, they're posturing, swearing, anything that's fighting, they're attempting to fight or be aggressive to signify to get that trigger away from them, right? Flight is running away, shutting down, refusing to talk or process, avoiding the trigger or issue that's in front of them. Freezing, dissociating, spacing out, appearing numb, disconnecting from those around them, or being completely unresponsive. This is a way that they just work through protecting themselves. Fainting is a new one. Onset of exhaustion, yawning, physically losing consciousness, another form, again, of dissociation. We can see this a lot if we're working with clients where they come in particularly perky and great and fine. And then all of a sudden, when we're talking about things going on, they begin to yawn, their eyelids begin to droop, right? That is a trauma response to whatever presenting trigger is there. Fawning can look like people pleasing, deferring, avoiding conflict or minimizing their own needs in order to satisfy or appease the trigger that's in front of them. And then fool around and fidget. In clients or people around us, we can see that they result to humor or playfulness, physiological responses like farting or farting noises, self-soothing or stimulation to help them feel more comfortable as a coping skill to what is in front of them.
And all of these present themselves in gym settings as well, right? So fight is pretty easy to visualize in a gym setting, right? Flight, we have some individuals who often will quit workouts in the middle of a workout. And, you know, some members who maybe aren't as trauma informed are like, yeah, they're always quitting. And it's like, yeah, there's something, you know, that's a trauma response. Their cortisol built up to a point in the workout where they need it, you know, their trauma responses to take flight. Freezing, right? And I've seen that in the gym setting before. Fainting is one that does also present in the gym setting. It seems like, oh, how would that happen? Like we talked a little bit about, cortisol builds up when we're working out. And so that is why those workouts can feel really similar to a trauma response, right? Our cortisol builds, it tells us to do something. And I always think back to, there's a clip of, his name's Matt Frazier. He is a massive CrossFit athlete, has, you know, won the title of the fittest man on earth like 6 different times. There are videos of him in line to go do one of their workouts. You know, in the middle of the day, they've done several workouts before, and he's yawning like before he's going to go do this really intense competition. And it's not necessarily a PTSD trauma response, but I always look at that and go, his cortisol is so high. He is so ready to attack this workout that his trauma brain is going into a response mode of fainting, right? Like, okay. And part of that, I would argue, right, I don't know him, right, is that dissociation of, I'm going to go do whatever I need to do to get through this workout. And we see that dissociation with professional athletes quite often. When we see the football player, you know, who breaks his ankle but finishes out the playoffs, or we see, you know, and we'll talk about the difference between professional athletes dissociating during workouts and us common folks, and why that's not nearly as advantageous for us to allow our clients to do. But we do see that one as well. Fawning, right, also can present in a gym setting, especially with clients who may fawn with their coaches or their trainers, right? And like, oh, I don't want to make you upset. And just kind of, and they may struggle with asserting some agency over their own training if that is their trauma response, and fooling around and fidgeting, right? Absolutely. Goofing around in the gym, just, you know, really kind of having those, what others would call inappropriate responses to things. And so just being aware of what all those can look like, both clinically and in a fitness environment. So the muscle brain endocrine loop is a lot of science, and again, really can have kind of its own piece of the puzzle as well. There's some really great information about this in one of the podcasts that are referenced at the end of this training here. But one of the reasons that movement and weightlifting is so important is because as our muscles contract, they then need to release, and they release all sorts of wonderful chemicals, some with really long names, some with some shorter names. But what those allow to happen is they reactivate our hippocampus. And so they literally, right, if we think about maybe somebody who has been bedridden for a while, right, and we start to think about muscles that have atrophied. And so they need to learn to walk again, or they can't, their grip strength is gone because they haven't used those muscles. Our brain is the same way. And so parts of our brain can atrophy when we've experienced trauma and we're dealing with anxiety and depression. And so we contract and release these muscles. We open up that hippocampus, and our muscles, literally, the bigger our muscles become, the more they're able to fight off symptoms of depression, because they release more and more of these depression fighting enzymes. And so we are waking up those parts of the brain that have atrophied. And so it really becomes this continual loop of the more we work out, the better we start to feel. And I read a research paper years ago that, kind of talks about it's really a catch-22, because one of the best prescriptions, if you will, that we have for depression is movement. And yet by the time we get to a point in depression where we need the movement, we're too depressed to engage in the movement, right? And so we really have to, again, find ways to start to encourage our clients to engage in a movement practice that works for them.
And that leads us into what is the window of tolerance? So either for ourselves or clinically, when we're handling and process feelings in a healthy way, right? And being able to function and thrive, we feel safe, capable, grounded, self-aware of what we're doing, oriented in our space. We are in this middle zone of our window of tolerance, right? We've got 3 levels here. When we ourselves or clinically see a client move into either flight or fight or freeze, we're going to see kind of two different reactions there. So when a client is overloaded, overstimulated, they're outside of their window of tolerance. They're in this flight or fight phase, or this arena, right, where in extreme stress, they can move into that window, where we may see more anxiety, panic, aggression, any of those ones where they are trying to rid themselves of that trigger. We can also see an opposite of that, where clients or ourselves may shut down. So they enter into that window of tolerance where they freeze. So we can see a lot of depression there, fatigue, disconnection, they're unfocused, they're dissociating. And this is trauma response. So when we experience trauma, we either enter outside of our window of tolerance or we go into that freeze, right? So we're either up here or we're down here. Either way, we are outside of our main healthy window of functioning. And what can happen with trauma or someone being re-traumatized is they never get back down into that window where they would like to be, where we would like them to be. And so through either lifting, exercise, movement, that can help them to regain that power to get out of that high window of tolerance or come up and get back into that main window area of healthy functioning. And I may not have touched on everything here, but this is the window of tolerance is a really great way to distinguish where someone might be, especially if we're working with them either clinically or in a gym setting, just to kind of check in and see where they are at.
Absolutely. And helping clients understand the concept of the window of tolerance and helping them start to explore their own window of tolerance can be crucial as they move into their fitness space. If I go into the gym, right, and my window of tolerance is wide open that day, I'm willing to try some new stuff, right? I'm cool. We're gonna try this lift or maybe even a complex. I'm gonna do some stuff that I'm feeling it. My window of tolerance is open. I feel safe. I feel good. If it's smaller that day, I might be entering the gym with my kind of more of an attitude, right? And I need to assess, is my window smaller because I'm hyper aroused or because I'm hypo aroused, right? I need to be able to have the language, ideally with my coach, but at least with myself about where I'm at. So let's say I'm hyper aroused, right? And I go in and we've got max out lifts programmed that day, or like a super complicated movement. That's too much for me, right? Like, I need to be able to have a conversation with myself and or with my coach and say, not today, right? Nope, not there. It's not within my window of tolerance. I'm going to move some weight. Maybe we're doing really, really heavy cleans today. I'm going to stick to like my 65%, right? I'll still clean. I'll still do the movements, but I'm going to stay in my bubble. I'm not going to try and hit my heaviest weight ever. I'm not going to max out. I'm going to stay at like 65%. It also lets my coach know maybe my form that day isn't the best, but instead of coming up to me and telling me that I need to get my knuckles down and I need to keep my arms close and I need to keep my feet planted, they're going to just give me one thing to focus on. Okay, Colleen, right? Today you're going to stay at 65% and I want you just to focus on a quick turnover. Okay, that's my only cue. That's what I can handle today. That's going to keep me in my window of tolerance. Maybe I'm hypo-aroused. Maybe I'm frozen or unfocused. Like I'm here, but like, I don't really know what's going on. I'm definitely still not maxing out, right? Like, that's still not a safe thing for me to do for myself that day. But I also know things are feeling foggy. So maybe I need to do sort of a check-in with myself. So maybe I'm doing a movement like a deadlift, right? It's not a complex movement. I can control the weight that I'm moving, but it's grounding me to the floor on every rep. I may also say, weightlifting isn't happening for me today. I'm going to do some conditioning. I've had several days where I've gone and gotten to the gym and there's a lift program and I'm hypo-aroused, right? And it's like, I don't have the focus to do that. I'm going to do my conditioning piece first. And then maybe that will open my window a little bit more and I'll come back and do my lift at the end instead of at the beginning. Or maybe I'm going to recognize, nope, I'll hit that lift tomorrow or another day. Like, I did my conditioning piece. I can always tell I'm hypo-aroused when I don't want to think, right? So I'll pick a conditioning piece that tells me do this thing for this many minutes and then be done. Okay, right? I can handle that when my window is small. So helping clients recognize how to check in with themselves and how open their window is, and then allowing them to give themselves permission to work within their windows, even if that means altering the programming that day. We talked a lot about this, right? But that window of tolerance at the gym. So when we're dealing with trauma, our nervous system just has less capacity for stress. And it also is less resilient. And so we can use that strength training component to really push, okay, how far can I get? If I feel like this, how much can I push? And over time, we can start to stretch our window of tolerance. I almost wish I had a video. It'd be another personal video. Maybe I'll incorporate it. But we had a movement at the gym the other day. We had box jumps, right? We're jumping onto a box, landing, coming down. It was a height that I could do normally just fine. For whatever reason, I couldn't do it, right? And I pushed myself to a level where my window of tolerance kind of shattered for a little bit. And I lost my cool a little bit. I was very upset with myself. I was able to make some modifications, take them out of my workout, do my workout slightly differently, and then was able to come back into my window and do them at the end of my workout without a problem. But that comes right from that understanding of where's my window of tolerance. Other clients may not have established that yet and may but may find themselves not doing a workout at all then because they couldn't do it the way they intended to start with. Or, I've seen individuals before, like, okay, I got to do this. And like, we have a coach who will be like, okay, we're going to go run to that building and physically touch that building and come back. And then you can try again for a couple of reps. But yeah, helping them expand that window of tolerance, but do that safely.
Well, and I think it's interesting too, when we're looking at a window of tolerance in that gym space, right, of helping them to do that safely and also helping them gain their power with setting those boundaries. Even, when you're talking about box jumps and doing deadlifts with a heavy weight, I had to tell myself no at one point because it would have caused an injury. And that can be very hard to do, but it's one of those things of really recognizing where the body and mind is at and not to push just to do it. And really setting those boundaries with that as well.
Absolutely. And our window of tolerance changes every day, right? So we talked about this earlier, but if a max lift is programmed and our window is closed up tight and locked that day, right? We don't want to do that. We can work through it when our window isn't wide open, but we have to learn what that looks like, right? And so how open is my window? What works for me when my window is small? Staying within our window allows us to be successful. Coaches and other people who come through and want to constantly push people through their resistance almost always are going to push them out of their window of tolerance, right? Yeah. So maybe somebody comes in and I'm coaching that day and I know that they can deadlift 250, right? I know they can. And I say, let's go. Like let's do this today. And they're like, no, like I want to stay at 150. I need to listen to that, right? I need to help respect that decision, not push them through that window of tolerance simply because I know it's something they can do. Lifting isn't always going to feel the way that we want it to. And so I have to decide too, okay, if it's not going to feel the way I want it to today, can I meet myself where I'm at and lift lighter? Like we talked about earlier, do I want to do something else and then try lifting or not at all? If it's not going to feel the way I want it to today and I'm not okay with that, maybe I don't do it at all and I go for a walk or I do something different that day. The other thing we want to help our clients be aware of are trauma reminders in the gym. And so there are times that athletes may just disengage, right? They may be doing just fine. Their coaches may not know why. And so clients bring this in to session. They may come to you and say, hey, like I was doing this thing at the gym and it just didn't feel good, right? And maybe they have an idea why, or maybe they have no idea why. And so helping them, there's some wonderful somatic experience therapists, right? Who really can help them dive into what that felt like and what that was, even some EMDR principles. There's an EMDR therapist who does phenomenal work with sort of what they talk about, like these triggering positions for people. And helping them experience that positioning in the office so that then they can go to the gym and gain some more control over that. But thinking about, a position of like a bench press that several individuals will lay back on the bench and have the weight, on their chest, no problem. But when we think about a bench press, we're laying backwards and our legs are straddling the end of the bench. And we're pretty open. And so individuals who may be survivors of sexual assault, right, may find themselves feeling incredibly vulnerable in a traditional bench press position. There's also some examples that individuals have shared of doing a front squat, where instead of on the back, the barbell's placed across the collarbones and we're holding that barbell. And that can mimic feelings of a domestic violence assault or a sense of choking. And so clients may know that, or they may be moving along just fine in their workout and then all of a sudden freeze. And they may or may not want to tell their coach or trainer that, and they don't have to, right? It's one of my favorite parts about Laura's book is talking about we don't owe it to anybody to tell them our trauma, but finding ways to process that through and help reestablish a sense of safety and be able to communicate, hey, I'm not going to do a normal bench press position, right? I'm going to choose to do an inclined bench press and keep myself elevated so I can see my surroundings, or I'm going to, whatever those modifications may be to help them create a sense of safety. Molly did a great job talking about orienting earlier. Some other things to think about with orienting, not only coming into the space, right, and doing those exercises that Molly shared, we orient ourselves instinctively when there's a threat, right? The second, like if you think about, I heard a noise in my basement, right? Or this just happened. We all of a sudden are taking note of what's around us. But like Molly talked about earlier, we can do that intentionally when we walk into a new setting so that we can feel safe and are ready to engage in healing work. And some of the things to help clients know to ask when they're in a gym setting, right, is what do you want to know about the programming? We have programming planned out for an entire month, right? And so do you want to know what's happening the next day? Do you want to know what lifts we're doing? Do you want to know how many sets we're doing? Do you want to know what that is? Or is that client somebody who maybe doesn't want to know and they want to come in and not know how many reps they're going to need to do of something? And all of that is okay, right? So again, some clients really are going to want to know, hey, this is how much I'm doing beforehand, because it allows them to know how long they're going to need to keep working or how many reps they're doing. For other clients, not knowing really allows them to feel safe in that environment because they're with somebody that they trust, right? So if I'm doing a workout and Molly's coaching me, right, and I go, okay, cool, we're doing burpees, right? I'm trusting Molly to tell me when I'm done, right? I'm trusting her to say, okay, we hit our 20, right? We're moving on. And that can be such an empowering experience for clients who don't have a sense of trust or have had that sense of trust stripped from them before. And so orienting is really part of them saying, I want to know where I don't, or this is how much information I want. And that can be really powerful.
So we've included another intervention here called just to assist with regulating emotions. So again, we're talking about that window of tolerance again and assisting either ourselves, our clientele, in returning to that main window, right? So you will need a non-breakable object, a tennis ball, or if you're within a gym atmosphere, like a medicine ball. And you can stand or sit, feeling your feet on the ground as you're sitting in a chair or a bench, and you're just going to hold the ball in your hands. And you're going to check in with yourself, orient, right? And notice any thoughts, feelings, or sensations. And you're not going to change anything, just notice it. And you're just going to pass the ball from hand to hand across the center of your body. You can be switching hands, you can do a small toss, whatever is comfortable for you, but allowing you to maintain control of that object. Again, you want it to be challenging enough to require your focus, but not so tough that you're dropping the object. We don't want to add any additional frustration there. You're going to pause after a minute or two and just notice the changes within your body or your system. And this is heavily geared from EMDR, so it's very much so activating both sides of the brain, and we're making that main connection there. And so the questions you can ask the client or ask yourself, has any tension, breathing, or your posture shifted at all? How do you feel emotionally? Are you grounded? Has the speed of your thoughts changed? Has the topic of your thoughts changed? And you're just going to notice what shifts that you were able to create with that small movement, and you're just going to go with that. And you're going to do that activity again. And you can do that as many times as needed, or as many times as the client is needed, until they're in a grounded space and they're in a oriented, grounded feeling there. Yeah. Anything else, Colleen? We're kind of going through that intervention quite quickly.
Yeah, no, I mean, like you said, some of that kind of mimicking that bilateral stimulation that we talk about in EMDR to ground and reorient. All right, getting into some self-care pieces. So we need to practice our responses to stressful situations. And weightlifting can increase our resilience to stress and our ability to tolerate stress. So we're often failing something and being fine with it. But when we think about weightlifting, we fail all the time. It is part of the process. It's a necessary part of the process. We are going to fail as we're learning the lift. We are going to fail as we are increasing weight on the lift. We are going to fail with weights that we've lifted before. It is okay. And weightlifting gives us a place to learn that it's okay to fail. It's safe. It is safe to fail at the gym. Not, you know, and that happens in so many senses of the word, right? They teach us how to fail physically, safely, so that we feel confident about failing. We also see others failing around us. Sometimes others that we look at and think, oh, they're so strong or they're so good, right? They're going to fail lifts. And so it's a safe experience, right? In a controlled environment. And when we do that over and over and over again, it transfers to helping us handle stress and failure outside of the gym. We talked a little bit earlier about that interoceptive awareness, right? And some somatic regulation. And so these pieces are really the ability to notice and regulate what we feel like inside our body and our brain, right? And we've said it a lot today, but we can leave a lot of environments. Our body isn't one of them. And so feeling that stress in the gym is a safe way, again, to fail over and over again and take those into the real world and be prepared for how to handle it. And so, you know, APA talks about exercise and mental health and being able to utilize that exercise to deal with anxiety and panic attacks, because we're going through that strenuous activity. We're mimicking all of the responses that happen when we're feeling anxious, and we're managing them, right? We're going through those motions and really being able to translate that, right? Because we often are really good at ignoring how we're feeling. We can't do that when we lift. We have to know how we're feeling. We have to be able to deal with how we're feeling. We can touch those feelings and we can make it stop, right? Whenever we want to in the gym. Okay, nope, that one didn't feel good. I'm going to stop, right? Or like that. And we can learn to tolerate those. And again, make that key transition to the real world.
Oh, self-care and fitness. So again, we're talking about those somatic symptoms, which are defined as our physical symptoms such as fatigue or pain, that just results in problems functioning physically or emotionally. So when we talk about that mind-body connection, so they are intertwined, they're connected. Have you ever experienced either sweaty hands, a stomach tingling when you were anxious, or and that's a mind-body connection. Communication occurs between and through mind-body with hormones and neurotransmitters. So researchers have found that the cerebral cortex in charge of language, reasoning, thoughts, had a neurological connection to the adrenal, oh my gosh, my vision here, medulla in charge of producing adrenaline. So thus influencing the body's response to stressful situations and identifying how stress and depression can impact organ function, such as high blood pressure or stomach ulcers. So some signs that you may be experiencing chronic stress. So it's feeling overly tired or angry or frustrated, irritable or unfocused, have that brain fog going on, headaches, not sleeping well, feeling anxious or sad or panicky. And so some mindfulness activities to relieve that stress and create a positive mind and body connection. So tap into body sensations. How is exercise, movement, lifting making your body feel? Identifying different muscle sensations regardless of how you're moving, recognizing what you feel within your body. Utilizing breathing cues. So utilizing different breathing techniques, observing the rate of your breaths during and after exercise, especially with big lifts, you have to breathe for your body to be able to handle the movement of that weight. Observing your surroundings, again, orienting for safety. So objects, sounds, the air, recognizing your own grounding techniques that you need to feel good within that space. We've got our pillars of self-care. I think we've got about 5 or 6 of them. They continue on the next slide, but mental, emotional, physical, and environmental. So going more into those, we've got that mental self-care that just involves creating a healthy mindset, right? Through mindfulness, creativity, and this can be done through a variety of ways. A lot of people like to journal, be creative or artsy. Creating a brain dump list is one of my favorites. It's just emptying out every thought that you've got onto a piece of paper, or however you choose to journal that way. Or taking an intentional break from screen time, to be able to give your brain, eyes, mind a break. Your emotional self-care. So practicing emotional self-care, you're going to want to create healthy coping strategies for stressors that might occur daily, right? And so you can do this by watching favorite movie, listening to music, positive writing affirmations for yourself, or asking others for help when you need it, reaching out to those social supports, but also setting boundaries to protect yourself. Your physical self-care. So again, this includes that rest, nutrition, movement. And this can include eating meals at regular times or however your body feels the best. Drinking plenty of water, taking multivitamins if that's what your body needs, getting sleep at night, or trying a new fitness class, right? It's really just taking that physical self-care and addressing that however you need to. Environmental self-care. So this is the space around you. Rearranging your workspace, or rearranging your room or your living room, or wherever the space that you live in, to help you feel better. Exploring new places, decluttering is always a good one, or going for walks outdoors. Really appealing to all of our senses for our body. Yeah, so we've got our spiritual self-care. So activities or practices that give you a sense of meaning to provide you with that spiritual self-care. This can look different for everyone. So either activities or practices, spending time in nature, finding a community, and identifying values that are the most important to you. Recreational self-care. So it's important to have hobbies and activities that interest you, that result in practicing, going on an adventure, or taking time to relax and doing nothing. And that looks very different for everyone, between playing video games or watching others play video games. It's the same. So your social self-care. So building relationships and connections, which include healthy boundaries with other people. So that can be, again, in a gym atmosphere, that is a community. So connecting that way, connecting with family, friends, being able to have a support group or an online community, and or when you're feeling stressed or down, listening to your body and the type of self-care that it needs so that you can appropriately address it. And taking time for you is crucial to maintain all the body and mind's health and wellness.
So, taking those self-care pieces, right? And how do we take those and integrate them into the gym? And I am going to rapid fire through these last few slides, but we live in a world, right, with a lot of fat phobic content. And so people are especially likely to give up on exercise when they don't reach weight loss goals. And so thinking about movement from an embodied movement standpoint, right, this more holistic path about healing and recovering, right, is really about experience in our bodies, no matter how marginalized they may be. And so helping clients understand there's more to this movement practice than weight loss goals. One thing I want to be really mindful and aware of, right, is the hyperarousal symptoms of PTSD can lead to compulsive exercise. And so again, we talked about how exercise can mimic those trauma responses. There are times when, especially when we're in a state of hyperarousal, where we're always preparing for battle. And so we want to be aware of our clients using an intentional movement practice, or are we engaging in compulsive exercise, right? And reactivating that trauma as a result. Additionally, we touched on the association piece, right? But we're not professional athletes, right? Most of us anyway. And so unlike a professional athlete who may dissociate through a torn rotator cuff, right, to finish out the World Series, and then have an extended period of rest and access to recovery, our day-to-day clients and typical athletes, right, don't have a professional season. And so they don't have a season of rest and recovery. And so paying attention to injury and pain is essential to making sure that we're not engaging in a dissociative response and causing further injury instead of taking the time to rest and heal. Overtraining leads to increased levels of cortisol. And so while we're working out to try not to live in fear, if we are building up that cortisol and not taking care of ourselves appropriately with rest and recovery, we're actually telling our bodies we're in danger. And so while we want to encourage movement and lifting and all of these great forms of healing, we want to make sure that we're doing that in a safe space. And so ways that you can support your clients through trauma-informed fitness, right, is helping them find a trauma-informed trainer. Now, this doesn't mean you need to go find the trainer, but talking to clients about what that may look like from a coaching perspective. And so does that person feel safe? Are they shaming clients into doing certain things or presenting themselves in certain ways that the client doesn't want to do? They shouldn't be adding that pressure. They should be letting their clients set the pace. We're not things excuses, right? We're not playing that word game of there's no excuses here, no pain, no gain, right? Like, no, we're not doing that. We shouldn't be working with trainers who are convincing clients to do something they're not ready to do. They really need to respect physical consent, right? Like touching is important in the gym, but consent is more important. And so getting verbal and physical consent if they need to put hands on a client to help show a movement, helping them identify their personal danger and safety cues, giving them autonomy over what to choose. So again, like, hey, I'm not feeling that movement today, and having a trainer that's okay with that. Ideally a trainer who understands the complications of trauma in the brain and the nervous system. But again, their trainer should not be their therapist. And so, again, I myself am a coach. I am not providing therapy for any of the athletes that I coach. I may work with their therapist if they want to release signs so that we can make sure we're on the same page, but I'm not doing therapy for anybody I'm training, and neither should their trainers. Mm-hmm. Understanding the mental needs of training, right? So do our clients should feel comfortable telling their trainer, hey, I want to know this training is predictable. I want to know we're back squatting on Tuesday and deadlifting on Wednesdays and doing cardio on Thursdays. Or, hey, cool, I trust you, but I want to know why, right? What's the purpose of the programming? That gives us a sense of control. Programming allows us to come in and get better without having to think about how to get better, which is awesome, because then explaining the purpose of our training plan builds trust with our trainer, and trust is what builds strength. And so those elements really do need to be connected. Understanding the emotional needs of training. So how is the client showing up to the gym? What's their attitude like when they show up? The same way we're doing a mental status exam when they come to the office, right? Like we talk about how we're showing up to the gym. How are they talking about themselves, right? Some of us are just wired to talk and think more negatively about ourselves. So, I'm so bad at this, right? There's a continuum we want to help them move through, right? So, I can't do anything, to, all right, I don't hate what I just did. I don't hate the number I just lifted, to, hey, I like what I just did, right? To like, I'm really good at this. Women in particular have been conditioned to not talk positively about themselves, that expressing confidence is not okay. And so helping our clients start small, right? They may not come to you and say, oh, I did awesome today. Listen to what I did at the gym. But they might say like, hey, that thing, like maybe it wasn't me. I'm not ready to own it yet, but that thing felt okay. Because asking for help makes us feel vulnerable. And so helping them, start feeling okay with that language. Helping them find agency. And so they need to be the author of their own recovery. They need to be able to act independently and make decisions freely in their movement practice. So invitational language is a great way to do this, right? So instead of like, hey, it's time to deadlift, are you ready to lift, right? Yep, the client can say no, but that gives us an opportunity to explore what those fears or reservations may be. And obtaining, not just asking and obtaining consent, especially before touching and every single time, right? I have some gym members who are like, it's cool, you can always touch me. No, I'm going to ask every single time because you may not want me to someday. And active listening. So we cannot work from our experience. It must be from theirs. And that's what's going to help the client practice that interoception. If a client comes to me and says, I don't want to squat today because my knee hurts, and my immediate response is like, oh, yeah, I've had knee pain before too. What worked for me, blah, blah, blah. No. I need to listen, like, what's going on with them. It's not my experience, it's theirs. Really quickly. So we're still learning, right? There is so much to do. We saw it in that news clip. Evidence is limited, but we are learning more and more. Trauma-informed care and exercise is so underexplored. As of 2021, there had only been 4 studies exploring exercise with women, and 2 of those had to do with walking, and 2 of them had to do with yoga. So not even weightlifting. Like, we have so much to do. We know that exercise is an incredible adjunct therapy. The Center for Trauma and Embodiment at JRI is who we did our wonderful training through. Their trauma-informed weightlifting program is one of their first new programs, and they're exploring the power of weightlifting to heal. And they're trying really hard at working to establish an evidence base for weightlifting as an adjunct treatment for trauma. And they're providing education for the weightlifting community. So much good work coming out of there, but we have so much more to do. And we see some additional challenges related to the affordableness of physical fitness, especially for marginalized communities. So people of color, immigrants, LGBTQ plus communities, and people with disabilities. So lots to do, but we're excited to be a part of this movement, literally and figuratively. Recovery, right? Our muscles don't get stronger the second we lift up a weight. Trauma is the same, right? We don't heal our trauma as we're in the office sharing it. We need to go home. We need to sit with that. We need to actively encourage rest and recover to increase both our strength and our resilience. Rest can be scary, right? We talked about it for the same reasons yoga can be scary. Intentional stillness can prompt feelings of vulnerability. There's a big fear, especially for those with an established movement practice, that if I stop moving, I'm going to lose this ability, and that's really scary. But we can search the continuum, and we can help our clients engage in active recovery and hiking and walking and things like that don't mean we have to be still. There was an intervention I wanted to do with you, but I really want to respect everybody's time. It's already after 11, but there is an activity also from Laura just called Pause Before You Move, and really just taking 5 minutes with yourself and grounding yourself and asking, what do I need today? And just recognizing the sensations and thoughts and feelings that come up about what you may need today, and trying to honor whatever your body says it needed before going into your movement practice for today. So I apologize that we won't get to do that one together. I was looking forward to that. But thinking about that for yourself today as you leave this training, what do you need today? What's your body telling you it needs, especially now after sitting for the last 2 hours? So thank you all for being here. I've got some time, so if somebody has questions, I'm more than happy to take some time, but I also, like I said, want to respect everyone's time. So if you go, please do. We will have a recording of this available, and so you'll be able to access that at any time. But if you have additional questions, please feel free to contact us as well. And thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you for joining in on today's training. We look forward to having you join us again. Heart and Solutions is proud to provide CE-eligible trainings for our counseling community. This training may be eligible for continuing education credit hours through either the National Board for Certified Counselors, provider number 7376, or the Association of Play Therapy, provider number 21-645. To obtain CE hours for today's training, be sure to follow the steps in the description below.